This podcast is made possible through donations from listeners like you and our partners at Tall Man Equipment, where they pride themselves on equipping their customers with the tools they need to get the job done right. They are dedicated to set the standard for quality, convenience, and reliability. At Tall Man, your opinion is important to them. Rate and review any product or tool you've used on their new website at tallmanequipment.com. Line 11 Clothing Company, making apparel for our first responders with a positive message to patriots that you can be proud of. A proceed of the cost goes to helping our foundation ignite the fire for father engagement. Give them a follow at Line 11 Clothing on Instagram. And last but not least, Monzingo Knives. Each knife is created with craftsmanship that only a tradesman could provide. Find them on Instagram at Monzingo Knives and get your American-made Monzingo knife today. Welcome to the Show Up Dad podcast. This podcast is created for hardworking fathers. At the Show Up Dad, we recognize that fathers providing for their children is certainly important. But when men truly understand their unique role and gain the knowledge and skills to be great fathers, they can transform and impact future generations. On today's episode, I would like to welcome Kelly Cardenas. He is a Forbes contributor, author, podcaster, founder, CEO of a national multi-million-dollar brand, and a cultural efficiency coach. Cardenas is the go-to when it comes to constructing a culture that will have a sustained success in all the aspects of your business. He has been named one of the most sought out interviews in the game today by Forbes magazine. And I just want to welcome you and thank you for coming on to our show, brother.
I appreciate it, man. And honestly, that introduction, it makes me smile. It makes me laugh because I asked my daughter what I do a couple of years ago, and she said, "Daddy, you simply make people happy." And then she went back to playing Legos. So, that keeps you humble, and it brought me back to that spirit of, my dad letting me know. I called him Pops, and Pops was always letting me know that there was only one business in the world and one business only, and that was the people business. And if you took the people out of the business, you had no business at all. And so for me, I'm simply like with all those things, the accolades or whatever it is, the successes, for me, it's never about that. It's about the impact that you leave on people.
No, I absolutely agree. I heard a saying one time that said, people don't really care what you know until they know you really care. And it's absolutely true, brother. Especially being an entrepreneur, a leader, an influencer, you got to show people that you care about them, and that's beautiful, brother.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you, man. And I appreciate what you're doing. Your voice is so important, I believe, in this world. And dads are something that are, the impact and the power that you have, man, David, that you're making on this world is just phenomenal. So my hat's off to you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that for sure. Well, let's open up with you telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind, your backstory, where you came from, parents, etc., and stuff like that, if you don't mind, brother.
Absolutely. So my dad was in the military. I got to say it in one breath, which I was born in England, Idaho, Taiwan, California, Utah, Florida, Las Vegas, Memphis, and then back to San Diego, where I live now in Carlsbad, California. And I grew up a military kid, and I can't read that well. I can't write that well. But my parents always told me three things. Number one, you're awesome. Don't, disconnect yourself from your accomplishments. Number two, you're beautiful. Don't compare yourself to anybody. And number three, which was the best, was you can do anything that you put your mind to, but just because you could do it doesn't make it right. And so stick to your purpose and everything will work out. And my dad would say this all the time. He just passed away December 19th, 2021. But he said to me up until the day he died, he said, "You're the greatest." And then he would pause and say, "So act accordingly, son."
Oh man, man, I'm so sorry to hear that about your father. You know what I mean? But that's an amazing, amazing deal right there. I mean, just to hear that from your own dad, you know what I mean? That's beautiful, brother.
Well, he would write. I tell you, David, he would write it every day. My mom would scratch my back and wake me up every day and tell me that I was awesome. And I didn't know what she was doing at the time, but what she was helping me to realize is that, when we get out of the trying to accomplish success, right? And that's especially today, it's such a tagline, like I've got to accomplish this, I got to grind, I got to hustle and do all this stuff. And what my mom was telling me from a very early age is, son, disconnect yourself from the accomplishment and simply accept your greatness, and greatness will come to you because it's already in you, and God made you that way. And I think now I look at it, and it's the reason why I say this, David, is because I believe it's because she knew I wasn't going to be able to read well. She knew I wasn't going to be able to write well. She knew I wasn't going to be able to maybe, be at the levels that my brothers are. My one brother's an attorney, the other brother's a doctor. And here I am, this kid that, I didn't even read a book until I one book from the time I was in kindergarten until high school. And, but the one thing was, is just having an attitude that said, like, if I put my mind to it, I could do it, but just because I could do it, it doesn't make it my purpose. And so that really gave me wings throughout my life, man.
And I like that too, because I'm trying to implement that with my own daughter as well. Like, I don't necessarily like telling them that you could do anything, right? and the reason being is, you're not everybody's going to want to, not everybody's going to aspire to be a major league athlete or whatever, right? There's certain things for certain people and whatever, you know what I mean? I get that, but that being said, I do agree 100% with you about purpose and using their gifts and helping them utilize those gifts. And I think that's our job as a parent, is to be able to help them navigate what they're interested in, what their purpose is, and help them find that. And it's hard. It really is, it takes a lot of listening to them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I just had that happen yesterday. Or was it 2 days? Maybe it was yesterday. My daughter sat with me and I said, "Are you okay?" Because we went to the mission, because here in San Diego, my son's doing a report on it. And I was a little bit, I guess you would say frustrated, because they were bickering with each other and stuff like that. And then she said, "Well, Dad, you seemed mad, but I could tell that you weren't mad at what was going on today. There was something else in you." And I looked at her at 13 and I'm like, "Who are you to tell me this is the reason why I was angry and you guys were bickering at each other?" And she just looked at me and she was like, "It wasn't because of what was happening today, Dad." And it really helped me to understand that, I believe our children are not here for us to mentor, but they're here to mentor us and help us to be able to see from a different perspective. My son, his name is Maddox. He's 10. And probably 3 years ago, probably one of my favorite stories with him is, he woke up, jumped out of bed one day and just hands in the air, and he yelled out, "I did it." And I looked at him and I was concerned and I was like, "What'd you do?" And he said, "I got up." And that's who he truly is. And I think that if we could lay into the inch stones as opposed to the milestones, the inch stones of spending time with our kids, you know what I mean? And not to say that it's going to make everything okay. But we're so focused as dads on the milestones. We're so focused on the goals. We're so focused on providing. And the kids are like, "I don't care if you have a car, if you have money, if you have anything, just spend some time with me." And that's what my pop really, really instilled in my mom too. My mom let me know that the best thing that I could do as a dad was to love my kid's mother. And, and to love my wife at a high level, is something that's being that's what I learned as being a dad, so and plus I got a really cool and hot wife, so it makes it pretty simple to do that.
Now, oh yeah, absolutely. Now hearing you just say that, Kelly, how did you learn to interact? Because I know a lot of times, as sons, we mimic what our parents do. So how was that interaction with your father and your mother, and how did they represent that to you, to where you're at, where you are at, in the way you treat your wife and stuff like that? How big of an impact was that, if you don't mind me asking?
I think it was, it was a big one. There was, I grew up, my dad's Mexican, my mom's white. They're both from Utah. So you can understand how this story starts off. And there was, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't cool to be Mexican, growing up when my dad did in Utah, in a little town called Tooele. And, so my dad had a lot of anger, he grew up with some anger, and he grew up with some, little chip on his shoulder and stuff like that. And so, there was what we call passion in the Mexican culture is fighting, right? That's what we learn. Like, you fight and then you get back together. Wow, that's love. And that was something that I saw, but you know, I credit my mom huge, because my mom was constantly, she was a prayer warrior. She was constantly praying for us. And, you know, although there was craziness, and when I call it craziness, all that's normal, and that's a normal family is crazy, right? Everyone
Yeah.
out there is like, well, my family's crazy too. Like, that's just normal. If your family's normal, then you're crazy.
Yeah.
You know, but I was connected with that kind of crazy, but in early on relationships with women, I found myself gravitating towards people who would fight with me. And I remember getting to a point, David, and this was crazy. I called my brother and I said, bro, I was dating my wife at the time. And I said, I've got some challenges. He said, what's the challenges? I said, well, Brooke and I are having some challenges. He said, what are they? And I said, she doesn't fight. And he's like, okay, so tell me the challenges. And I said, well, that's the challenge. She doesn't fight. And he said, he really changed and impacted my life at this time. He said, you know, Kel, it's okay to be okay. And for the first time in my life, I realized that fighting wasn't something I gravitated towards fighting because it was what I saw growing up. And at that point, I realized that it was all right to be in a place where you were peaceful.
Yes.
And once that happened, I chose that and ran with it, as you know, not to say that I don't have a perfect marriage. No one does. But for me, I want to honor my wife, you know, just, you know, she's a phenomenal woman. And I know that my daughter's watching, and my dad said this to me. My pop said that kids are, he said, boy, because he would always call me boy. He said, boy, you know what the difference between a child and a video camera is? And I was like, what, Dad? And he's like, the video recorder has a pause, rewind, and delete button. And then he just paused. And I was like, wow. And what he was letting me know, man, is my son's watching how I treat my wife. My daughter's watching how I treat my wife, and she's going to choose a husband based off of how I'm treating my wife. And my son's going to treat his wife based off of the way I treat my wife. And I mean, we both serve the same God, you and I.
Yes.
And I don't want him coming down on me because I sent these two kids down the road, because you know some verses about that stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Definitely don't want to lead them astray. I mean,
that's a millstone around my neck. You know what I'm saying? I ain't trying to have that.
Absolutely. It's crazy that you said that, because when you were telling that story, Kelly, I had a similar story with my daughter. You know, obviously we moved to Southern California recently, and she was transitioning really good. And she's my teenage daughter. She's 15. And one day she, you know, all the countenance in her was just down. You know, I'm like, oh, what's going on, Dakota? Are you okay? And she's like, oh, I'm okay. And I'm like, no, I was like, seriously. I was like, what's going on? And she's like, well, Dad, I don't fit in. And I'm like, oh, you have tremendous amount of friends. You're flourishing here. Everybody likes you. What do you mean you don't fit in? And she's like, well, Dad, I don't feel like I fit in when they talk, because no one's talking about who got beat up or who's fighting. And I was blown away by that. And I had to stop her, and I had to tell her, okay, listen, honey, what you just said. I was like, that is the exact reason why we moved from Albuquerque, New Mexico, is because of that violence. That's not okay. That's not okay type of thinking. And she had to pause, and she thought about it. She's like, you know what, Dad, you're absolutely right. That's not okay. You know what I mean? But you're right. I mean, it's that passion, I guess, or machismo, or whatever it may be. You know what I mean? But we grew up in a very violent culture over there as well. I mean, some of the best fighters in the world came from Jackson and
Winkle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. In fact, I was one of Tom Vaughn's students 20 years ago at Greg Jackson's West. So
yes,
we knew about that, you know.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? But yeah, that's crazy though that you said that. You know what I mean? Just being able to look and reflect at that, and then just be able to see that that's not okay behavior. And like your brother told you, which was great sound advice, it's okay to be at peace.
And I tell you, that wasn't something that, you know, that I understood. I thought you had to be in chaos, and chaos was what I grew up in, you know, and not to say my parents did a great job. They, you know, they did the best with what they had.
Mhm.
But there was chaos. I mean, we lived, on base, and one day my dad just said it's done. And I said, well, what? We don't know what is done. He just said that is done. And he had a moving truck come, and he started packing up everything. And my friends came to me and they were like, hey, where are you moving? Because on base, when you're in the military, everyone thinks that moving is normal. So they're like, okay,
Yeah.
where are you moving? And I said, I don't know. And they started laughing, and they're like, they're on their bikes. I'm in 6th grade. And they're like, ha, whatever, man, where are you moving? I said, I don't know. And then they said it a third time, and I got mad.
Mhm.
And I was like, I don't know. And, that's really, I mean, when things went kind of sideways for us. I was in 6th grade, my brother's in 8th grade, my older brother's in 11th grade. And my parents, my dad packs up everything. And then my parents got into a little fight, and my mom packed us up in the car while my dad was going to get some boxes. And then we went into hiding, and we had a 1-bedroom apartment. We lived with 4 of us. Double beds on the floor with no box springs, and just pushed together. There was 3 of us brothers. I slept in the middle because I was the youngest.
Mhm.
And, those kind of things, I just thought that was normal. But little did I know
Mhm.
that all the time that I was going to spend, by myself or walking with my brother to school and doing these things on our own, it was God's plan, because he knew that my parents were going to go to heaven earlier than I expected them to.
Oh,
And
wow.
so now I'm 46 years old, and both of my parents, my mom went to heaven in, 2018 on June 19th. And my dad went December 19th of 2021 at 62 and 68. And so now I'm a 46-year-old man that was conditioned,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
There was some lions, there was some bears. And now when I see that Philistine in front of me that's saying, like, this giant saying, I'm gonna knock you out, that's life. I'm saying, like, I already took out some bears and some lions because I had to as a kid. This
Mhm.
thing in front of us, we don't have a challenge, but I believe that God prepared it that way. I wouldn't have suggested it, but he did. And, my parents always told me, they said that, if you can't change the things, you can't choose the things that are going to happen to you in your life, but if you fall in love with your current circumstances, the
Mm.
magic will happen.
Man, that is so deep, bro.
Man, I have to pause there for a minute because that's some solid advice right there. It's true. If you stay there, you can, you could look at it both ways. You can stay there and get stuck, or you can reflect off of it and learn. You know, I'm blown away with that, bro. Honestly, I am.
No, thank you. I mean, it's one of those things, is for me, the glory, right?
Mhm.
That glory piece, there's no way that our family could have made it through the things that we did, without him. And
Mhm.
that's what my mom was constantly. And I'm not saying, oh, this was bad because my parents split up, or I'm down, or anything like that. And what I'm saying is we went through it. We went through it. My story, or somebody else's story. I'm never comparing them,
Mhm.
but I just believe it seasoned me, seasoned my brother. And now when I look at those kind of things, it's, my mom told me the only word that she would ever use that
Mhm.
was a curse word was this, David. She would say, shit. Like, if it
Hmm.
doesn't work out, shit, maybe you weren't supposed to do it at the time. If you lost your job, shit, maybe you needed a new job. And I remember she said this one time when I woke up, and everyone has had this experience, everyone out there listening, you've had the experience of waking up late and your alarm clock not going off.
Mhm.
And I woke up and I was so mad. I was running around, and my mom was like, shit, like, don't let it ruin your day. And when I say that, David, I was late for the interview today, and I apologize, profusely, but I had to go to my mom that way. And I had to go into my dad's side today. When I was an hour late to this show,
Mhm.
I could beat on myself and just think that this is horrible. And I did so. And then, but it was like, shit, like, let me apologize.
Mhm.
And let's move on to that next thing. Let me fall in love with this, because God has a plan. He's never, never, never late. He's seldom early, but he's always right on time. Just like my son, when he's 10 minutes late, he walked down the stairs and raised his hands in the air, and he was like, right on time. And I was like, no, you're not, you little joker. But in his mind, he's exactly where he needs to be at the particular time that he needs to be there. And when we're in that place, we can be present. And that's where God will bring the magic into our lives.
Wow. Wow. No, that's amazing. How, how can we utilize that with our children? I mean, because that's a great way to look at it instead of getting hung up on our, you know what I mean, not being able to be perfect, right? Because everybody has this perfection attitude where you need to be perfect, you need to be perfect. That's the type of household I grew up in. Um, that's a good way to train our kids to look at things and be like, hey man, life happens, but hey, shit. You know what I mean? Pick up, dust yourself off and move forward. You know what I mean? Don't get stuck there, right?
Absolutely. I screwed up the other night. I was with my son, he's 10, right? And
Mhm.
we started playing NBA 2K. And if you've ever, anyone out there listening, if you've ever played NBA 2K or Madden with your son or daughter, they will whoop your tail. They will beat you into the ground. And my son had no humility that night. He was beating me by 50 points in NBA 2K. 50 points. And every time he would drain a three, he would be like, another one, Dad. You can't stop me. That D, he would block a shot and he'd be like, that D is crazy, Dad. He's 10. And I was getting angry. I was getting mad. Like if you're listening to this as a dad, you played Nintendo and you threw the controller.
Oh
And I
yeah.
had the controller in my hand. I was so mad. And then he just kept doing it. And I turned to him and I was like, yeah, you're saying that now. And I said it like this to a 10-year-old. I said, yeah, you're saying that now, but when I start whooping you, you'll be crying. And then David, I caught myself and I was like, I am almost 50 years old. I'm a 46-year-old man trying to flex on a 10-year-old. And I had to go to my mom and be like, shit, like, son, I am so sorry. He's like, no, Dad, it's cool. I was like, no, dude, it's not. I was not being nice at all. And I was getting whooped. Like, I mean, so dads, give yourself some grace, celebrate some little inch stones. Don't be focused on the milestones because you're going to screw up a ton. And when you screw up, shit, maybe you were supposed to. And I want to finish this thought here, David, is like this.
Mhm.
This morning, God woke me up this morning and he said, leave me room.
Mm.
Leave me room. And I was like, because I needed to get to the beach. I needed to read. I needed to do all this stuff. And he said, leave me room today. Leave me room enough to bless you. And
Wow.
then when I was getting in the shower, I was, cause I get myself pumped with hip hop. I'm a hip hop head.
Mhm.
And, but there's a song by Eminem and Super Bowl just happened. And he said, success is my only option. Failure's not. And I was
Mhm.
like, I was singing the song. I was getting hyped, ready to go to work. And then God was like, failure is an option in my book.
Mm.
And I was like, whoa, because that through that failure, he's going to humble us, help us to realize that he's in control. And then when he's in control and he blesses it, who do we talk about when we succeed? Him, not our methods.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it keeps us humble when that happens. I don't know how many times I've been humbled by God, and if we don't like it, we don't. And we question, right? I mean, I do all the time. I'm like, why do I have to go through this? I see your plan, God, but why did I have to go through it like this? And that's one of the seasons we're at right now. Is I'm like asking God, okay, I see your master plan, I see what you're doing, but I don't like it, because it's uncomfortable, and that's that growing season that we go through, right?
Absolutely. And I think when we allow God to be in control, like, and he said that so strong to me and he repeated it today over and over again. He was saying like, failure is an option with me.
Mm.
Failure is an option with me because I'm not going to have every single thing that you think that you want succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's rough, man. Especially like, I'm like, that's not a part of the deal. That's not what I signed on for.
Mm-hmm.
But also my son, he didn't sign on for his dad trying to flex on him. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Because of NBA 2K, we mess up, we learn, and I'm probably still going to lose my cool with my son. He beats me like 50 points. I'm going to go after him. I'm going to arm bar that little joker. You know what I mean?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, with that being said, just hearing you say that, about God, what God spoke to you and stuff like that. How, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, does it transitioning to kind of thinking about like on focusing on what really matters? You know what I mean? Because sometimes I know God will put roadblocks, right? He'll stop something, right? You know, one of the things that I always pray for in my family is God shut doors no man can open, and open up doors no man can shut. And then sometimes he does that, and it's just like, oh my gosh, these doors are shut. Like for me, prime example is I prayed and prayed and prayed I can work back at this one utility, you know, that I had been wrongly terminated for. Okay. Um, it took me 7 years, dude, 7 years on the road thinking, okay, God's bigger than this. God opened up the doors for this. Why would he allow me to work here? And then all of a sudden shut the doors. I mean, I had vice presidents and everything calling me and be like, dude, we don't know why you can't work here. They just, HR does not want to, you know, not keep you from being banned, because that was part of the measurement of punishment that the HR department would imply. As soon as you left them, or if you got fired from them, they would completely just ban you off of property, which meant property meaning any power line in the state that belonged to them. And for a monopoly like that, that pretty much means you can't work at home. So then now, guess what? David has to, you know, provide for his family. Now David is out there working in different states. You know what I mean? So I know what you're talking about, man. And when we prayed for that, God really did that, and that's what spawned this whole deal for me to be able to start this organization and what we're doing. You know what I mean? Just saying, okay, God, what do you have for me? Then I understand that these doors are closed, you know?
It's powerful, man. It's hugely powerful. And the fact that you're listening, man, I think is a big one.
How have you applied focusing on what really matters to your own family? Like I know you're highly successful and everything like that. How do you apply that? How do you keep that balance? Because I know a lot of our listeners are always asking, how do you have balance? How do you find balance with working and trying to provide and being a dad and everything else? So how do you be successful in your own home?
Well, I think that number one, throw balance out the window.
Yes.
Balance will never happen. You never be balanced. And if you are truly balanced, you're only going to give 50% in one thing and 50% in another. And
Yes.
the last time I checked my grades when they were 50%, I was failing, which I was happy with, but most of you are probably sad because that, like getting to a 50%, I was like, yay, like, I got a 50-50 chance. But when we truly balance, and if you have three things in your life, you're a dad, you're a business owner, or you're a dad, a lineman, and then a husband, you're only going to give 33% if you are balanced. So throw balance out the window. And what I would suggest is, like my wife tells me, be 100, like be 100 wherever you are. Like right now, I'm not a dad. I'm not a husband. I'm not a podcast host. I'm not a writer. I'm not a hairdresser. I'm not a business owner. I'm a guy who's spending time with my friend David, who is the podcast host, who needs to be lifted up, and who everyone in this world needs to hear his voice because he's making a difference. And so if we can be 100 exactly where we are, then magic happens in that moment. And then when we go home and we're with our parents or with our wife, we be 100 with her and shut everything else down. Now, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have cell phones.
Right.
But they're there. And it doesn't mean that the cell phone is a devil. And there's times where I'm too much on my phone, and there's time, but again, like sometimes you're never going to be 100 in those times, but that's, if you can simply focus right where you're at, like shut everything down. Like I find that so many people are focused on going and getting things that they don't really need to impress people that they don't even like. And if you can just simply be, like, it's so cliche, but there's no balance, be 100 wherever you are. And I tell you, when you do that, like, it's amazing the opportunities that will come. And I can tell you this, which I was scared of when I was a kid. You will never miss the bus. The person who created you built the bus, and the bus was made for you. You can never miss the bus. So don't think, if I don't go get this opportunity, if I don't leave my wife right now and go and do this thing at whatever, maybe it wasn't for you at that time. It's okay. Calm down, choose mastery, slow it down, and you'll find the world to come to you.
Wow. No, you're absolutely right on that. I grew up with that same pattern in life too with my father. He'd tell me, you always, if you're not ready for that bus, it's going to leave you. That was one of the things that he taught us, so it was like, all right, I'm ready for that bus. You know what I mean? And go get it. And I was always left with this feeling that if I didn't make it happen, and if I didn't go and get after it, with that tenacity that God had placed in me, that it was never going to happen. And you're absolutely right. Once you slow down and have that mastery, like you're talking about, it does come to you. It really does. And one of the things I've found that for me to realize if it's from God, right, is God doesn't rush you. If you're feeling pressured and rushed, that's not from him. That's for me, that's a clear indicator that it's not right for me. You know what I mean? Because how many times have you been in that situation? I'm sure you have plenty of times, Kelly, where it's like people are telling you, hey, we're leaving right now. We need to do this. You need to do this. This is going to happen. I need your signature, whatever it may be. Right. And it's like, it doesn't feel right. And you're rushed. You're like, oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man. You know what I mean? And I found 9 times out of 10, when I didn't jump on that for that feeling of missing out, right? Because that's what it is, that it was perfect. It's like, oh, thank God that didn't happen. Thank God I didn't sign that lease. Thank God I didn't do this, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we tried to buy a building. My wife and I tried to buy a building a couple years back, and we had the deal done, and I negotiated them down from, I think it was 1.4 down to 975. And we were ready to go, and we were so excited. And then literally I was going to put the earnest money down, and I called my loan officer and I just said, I just wanted to let you know before I put the money in, I just wanted to call you. He's like, oh, I was just about to call you. You got denied. And I was like, what? Like, I got denied for 975, but I just got approved for 1.5 probably 2 or 3 months before. And I was like, how can this even happen? And there was no explanation, but it was almost as if God was just gave me a peace, right? Well, guess what happens with that building? That building then goes into auction, ends up selling for 700,000. So I would have been 250 in the hole. And then a year and a half later, the pandemic happens, and I would have been stuck with that building. So God knows. And I'm saying that this isn't a perfect science. You know what I'm saying? Like when I say like, stay peaceful, stay in the moment and all those things. I mean, my wife just had a conversation with me the other day. She took me out to lunch, and she was like, look, all the things that you think that you're doing and you think you need to do, it's not bringing you any joy, and that doesn't serve our family. So I don't care what you ever accomplish. You need to stop doing what you're doing, because we need you joyful. When you're joyful, our family will thrive. But when you're not joyful and you're like, oh, I'm going to go get this thing, which I wasn't leaving room for God to work.
Man, and how many of us are guilty of that? Seriously. I mean, it's right. Cause like my wife used to call it work mode. She would have to tell me, she's like, you know what? Your daughter doesn't need work mode, Dave, right now. You're not talking alignment. So, don't, watch your words, basically, is what she was telling me. She's like, you can't be speaking to her that way, because I was very harsh with my words. And it's not that I meant to do that or anything. I didn't want to show her disrespect or anything like that. It's just, you get heated, you're passionate, and then all of a sudden you go into work mode, because that's where you feel. And I think a lot of fathers feel this. They have that box that they feel comfortable in. So when there's some sort of disarray or whatever, we tend to go back to that box that we feel most comfortable in, the box that we have the most respect in. And that's what we fall back to. That's our default. So then all of a sudden I'm talking to her in a way that I'm not, that I feel comfortable in, but it's not necessarily comfortable for her. And it's coming off very argumentative, very aggressive. And it's something that we don't need to do to our daughters or our wives,
You got that right.
Now, I wanted to ask you, Kelly, how has becoming a dad changed your life?
Ooh. I don't know if it changed it. It just gave me a new one. You know what I mean? You have to exchange it in. Like, it's funny because, I have clients that I've been seeing since I was 20 years old. And, or actually I've won since I was 19 and I'm 46 now. So the conversations that we used to have, like, yo, what party you going to this weekend, to what club you going to what car you buying, to be like, oh, wow, did you choose the right school district? You know what I'm saying? Like it switches and it changes. And I tell you, like, I think just and when I go back to it, it may sound cliche, but just falling in love with that moment. Some people are like, oh, I loved 7 years old for my kid and they're 10 and they're a nightmare. I'm like, enjoy the nightmare, because it's not going to be there for that long. Right. And, you know, your nightmare is somebody else's dream. The things that you're going through in your life, maybe you're having a challenge in your marriage and you're fighting, or you're fighting with your kids. I have a friend who last year, almost to the day, lost his 24-year-old son.
Wow.
So if you're fighting with your son, your daughter, they're still here. My friend would die to have one more second of, even if it was altercation with his son. But when I started to realize that most of the time, the challenges that I had, right, the challenges that I faced, or, you know, when my daughter, you know, went through a challenging time with the pandemic, and, you know, it gets, you know, she's in her room and, you know, all the anxiety, the depression and all the stuff, it's sitting in and realizing that, you know, again, I realized, because what I wanted to do, and I'm sure that you did this too, David, and our generation of dads is like this. I went through this, so I'm going to work my butt off so my kids never have to go through this. But we don't realize that the person that was built and the structure that was built in us, that's awesome, right? That's what my mom told me. That's awesome. Was built by us going through all those things. And sometimes having when I wanted the skates from the skating rink, and my mom brought me some Veriflex ones. And if you know Veriflex, you know what I'm talking about. They were the busted up ones. And I got those Veriflex and I was so mad, but I look at it now and I'm like, all those kids that got those shiny skates, a lot of times they don't have the grit and the tenacity to be able to make it through some of the storms that they're going to go into. And so I'm thankful for it. You know, I'm thankful for those things. Again, it's not a perfect science. I keep messing up all the time. I say bad stuff to my wife and then she checks me on it. I say bad stuff to my son, which I told you about, my daughter. And I just keep on saying, like,
shit.
Like, you know what I mean? I want to try. I'm going to try. I mean, there's no other option in it. But I want to finish the thought with this. You know, if you're having challenges with your wife right now, you know, if you're out there, you're listening, you have challenges with your wife. I've got a friend that, you know, got divorced 3 years ago and it was devastating, you know, his 2 children, and now he's a single dad. And, you know, I tell you, like, if we start, like my mom told me this, she said that God's in the midst of the praise of his people, to praise him in all things, and that praise unlocks blessings. So praise him now for the blessings that are coming, because that will be a show of faith as opposed to acting on circumstance. And that's what he wants our relationship to be based on, is faith and not the circumstance. So praise him right now. If you're in the storm, praise him right now and watch him unlock the blessing in your life. I promise you.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing, because you're absolutely right. Ever since the pandemic, there's been so many marriages that have been just devastated. I mean, and it's crazy because a lot of them were Christian people. I mean, majority of the people that I knew that got divorced were professing Christians. And it's sad to see that, you know, because we're called to be the light of the world, right? We're called to share God's grace and love, and give people a hand up, not a handout. And for that to be happening to God's people, to any people actually, but I mean, especially the kingdom people, you know what I mean? It's sad. It is really, truly sad. You know what I mean? At that moment, a lot of the men that I've spoke to, they said that they didn't even know that it was happening. You know what I mean? They'd never had a thought. Like, if you were to ask them, hey man, how's your marriage? They'd be like, oh, it's amazing. And then you ask the wife, and the wife's like, I want a divorce. And it's like, they were taken back by it. You know what I mean? They had no idea it was happening, you know, and it's true. I mean, God's there. He wants to be praised, and start praising him. You know what I mean? Because they say divorce, right? Divorce is as bad as losing a child, the pain, the trauma that it actually puts you through. And I can't imagine losing a child. I have 3 beautiful children that God's blessed me with. And man, I can't imagine that kind of pain. honestly, you know?
And when I say this to all the listeners out there, like, I'm not judging anything. I was divorced. You know what I mean? Like I had a Hollywood wedding. My first one. The reason why I say a Hollywood wedding, because I was only married for a year and 2 months, and it cost me a lot of money. So you know. But again, growing up, I didn't think when I was 5 years old, yay, I'm going to get divorced someday. But I don't understand and know all the things that are going to happen. And so I had to, when I got divorced, literally, I had to say, shit, like maybe I wasn't supposed to be with her. And now I'm so happy that I'm divorced because I got a chance to meet my wife, you know? And so I think that when we can take an outlook on life that way, I believe that we can choose joy. I'm not going to be able to choose my circumstance, right? But I can choose joy. But happiness is going to come with sadness. Happiness high, sadness really low. Yay, I got the job. Oh, I lost it. Oh, I got the car. Oh, I lost it. That's a roller coaster that most of us are on, but we're basing our life off circumstance as opposed to just being like, I lost my job. Yay. Maybe I'm supposed to have a new one. I got a new job. Yay. Like my son, I woke up. Like, you know what I mean? I did it. Yep. And I tell you, like, this is probably the coolest thing. I was with my pop and I'm cooking breakfast. And I'm cooking pancakes, and I get kind of ego when I'm cooking pancakes for my kids. I'm like, yo, what would you like? I'm not even a good cook, but I'm like, what would you like, baby? And she's like, Daddy, I want a dog. I was like, I got you. Like, I'm gonna make a dog. And so I started to pour out the dough or the little pancake batter, and it looked like a llama, David, but I was saying it was a dog. So I flipped it over. It looked like a llama, but she's like, Daddy, a dog. Yay. And I was like, son, and I had attitude by this time. And I looked at my son. I was like, Maddox, what you got, man? What you want? Anything. Your dad's got it. And my dad's in the kitchen. He's just laughing at this. And my son's like, I want an Iron Man pancake. And I looked and I was like, no, you don't, son, because Daddy can't do an Iron Man pancake. I don't know what one looks like. I can't draw very well. And especially with this batter, it ain't gonna happen. But I turned to my dad. My dad just smiled and shook his head like, you got yourself into this, go, boy. And so I started to drizzle the batter out, and it just was a big burnt blob. Like, it was nasty and it didn't look like anything. And I turned to my dad and I was like, what am I going to do? And he said 3 words that changed my life. He said, sell it, boy. And so I knew, and I turned and I said, Iron Man pancakes, 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 Iron Man pancakes. As I'm flipping the thing and I'm keep singing the song, and I put butter on it. I say, Iron Man pancakes, Iron Man pancakes. And my son starts looking at me and I'm like, are you ready, boy? Because it's coming. Iron Man pancakes, Iron Man pancakes. And I bring it over. It looks nothing like Iron Man. I set it down on the plate, put some syrup on it, and I said it again. I said, Iron Man pancakes, Iron Man pancakes. And I slid it across, and my son looked at me and he paused. He looked at down at the pancake, and it was like, to me, it was like 10 minutes or probably 10 seconds. And then he looked up at me and he was like, Iron Man pancakes, Iron Man pancakes. And he was like, this is the greatest, Daddy. You made me Iron Man pancakes. Every one of you can have Iron Man pancakes today if you choose joy.
Oh, wow. Absolutely, brother. No, that is so amazing. You know what I mean? Just really changes your whole outlook on life, right? I mean, and what do you choose to look at? What are you choosing to focus on? I mean, I know for a lot of us out there, sometimes the weight of life brings us down, right? And it lets us, it gets into us, right? And when it starts getting into our innermost parts, it starts affecting us, and it starts affecting everything around us. You know, one of my good friends, a dear friend of mine, we were at his house one night and he opened up the screen door and it was cold. I remember it was in the middle of winter and it was cold, and the cold air came in. He's like, do you feel that? And we're like, yeah, shut the door. What are you doing? And he shuts the door and he's like, oh, what did I do? I was like, you let in the cold air? He's like, yeah, that's one way of putting it. Another way to putting it is I changed the atmosphere. He's like, as a father, we have the same ability to change the atmosphere where we are at. He's all, so choose wisely. And I was like, wow, you know what I mean? That blew me away, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can I tell you one more story about my son? Because my son is like, he blows me away. It involves my son and my dad. Am I allowed to tell you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll tell you quick. So when Dude Perfect came out at first, my son's a big Dude Perfect fan. I want to have Dude Perfect on the, if you're listening out there, Dude Perfect, I'm looking for you. I'm coming for you. But he wanted to go to the concert. There's a concert for Dude Perfect. And I called my buddy up and I was acting like I was the celebrity dad. I was like, don't worry about it, son. I got you. And I called my buddy in Vegas. My buddy said, don't buy tickets. I got you. I was like, cool. It was like 2 months out. I was going to buy meet and greet the whole nine because I wanted to impress my son. And my friend's like, don't worry, I got you. And then the 3 days before the concert, I'm like, man, I ain't got no tickets yet. A day before the concert, ain't no tickets. I call him. He's like, yeah, don't worry about it. I got you. Day of, no tickets. He finally, after I called him on the day of, he sends me out tickets, but I know that he actually just bought the tickets right then. And I know where the arena is. And he sends me the tickets. I look at the tickets and I'm like, damn, like these are high tickets. Like high as far as high in the arena.
Yeah.
And I got the kids in the car. I got 3 tickets, me, my daughter, and my son. We get in the truck and I call my dad and I was like, Dad, I don't know what to do. He said, what are you talking about, son? I said, I want to take my son to, Maddox to Dude Perfect. And I was going to get him meet and greet and I want him to understand what life is like. And I want him to see a different side of life. But I got these tickets, man. And they're the worst tickets in the place, like the worst. Not even, there's not a worse ticket in the whole arena. And I said, son, I said, Pop, I don't even want to take him because they're that bad at tickets. And he just told me, he said, son, Maddox will react the way you react. And so as we're driving down there, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so great. We're going to Dude Perfect. And he's like, Daddy, because we had just went to the Clipper game and we were front row on the floor. He's like, Daddy, are we super VIP? That's what he called it. Are we going to be super VIP? And I said, I don't know, son. He said, are we going to be VIP? I said, I can't promise anything, but I know they're great tickets, son. And the whole way down, about 45 minutes, Dad, are we going to, we VIP? And I was like, I don't know, son. But we walk into the arena and I swear to you on my life, these tickets were the worst, the top row and on the side. So you couldn't even see the stage. You could barely see the stage. And I know where we're going, but we walk into the arena and you walk in on the top and then you walk down to your seats. But we didn't have to walk down because we were on the very top of the arena. As I look, the top of the arena only has concrete benches, David. Concrete benches, not even chairs. And so as I walk in, I see the concrete benches and I was like, oh my gosh. My son said, what, Daddy? I said, oh my gosh. He said, what, Daddy? I said, there is the VIP section. He said, where, Daddy? I said, right there, the cement. You see how there's chairs? The cement is VIP. He said, that's VIP. Are we there? I said, I don't even know, but we got to walk around and find our tickets. I can't promise you anything. And then we walk all the way around to the absolute worst place in the whole arena. And I stopped and I looked at the tickets and I said, oh my gosh, son. He said, what? And I said, we are VIP. And I said, there's our seats right there. He said, it's VIP, Daddy. He sat down. And then about 10 minutes into the concert, he turns to me. He's like, Daddy, you know how I know this is VIP? And I was thinking, no, you just found out that I'm lying to you. And he said, because see all those people down in the front row? And he pointed and he's like, see them? And I said, yes. He said, Dad, they can only see what they could see. And I said, okay. And he said, but we could see what they could see, plus we could see what we could see. So that means that we're VIP, Daddy. High five. And to this day, he still thinks that he went to a VIP with Dude Perfect. But I believe that that's the way that we need to realize as dads, our kids will react the way that we react. And we don't have to have perfect circumstances. Just fall in love with the garbage, the crap, the dark, the nasty, the dirty, and let the manure and the doo-doo in your life fertilize all the amazing seeds that have been planted throughout your life.
Man, that was amazing, brother. That was an amazing story. Absolutely. I mean, wow, that's going to help our listeners tremendously, bro. Man. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. This has been an amazing broadcast. I mean, I know our listeners are just going to be so blessed by it. How can people get a hold of you, brother, if they want to reach out to you and ask you questions or anything like that, if you don't mind sharing that?
Well, the first thing that they could do is I put a QR code. I'll send you a link, and I'll send you a link for every one of your listeners to. I would love to take care of a gift from you and I'll get them my book complimentary. So I'll send you the link for that. So be looking. If you're listening, look for that. Also, you can hit me on at the real Kelly Cardenas on Instagram, kellycardenas.com. You could do that. And honestly, the Kelly Cardenas podcast on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere you find your podcast.
Once again, brother, thank you so much for coming on here and just blessing us with all this great insight and how to be a better father and just falling in love with our crap. Truly, I mean, that's amazing, brother. I mean, I never heard it that way before. You know what I mean? And it's absolutely true. You know, but thank you once again, bro, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much, man.
God bless.